Hello, I'm Lillian, just Lillian. I'm not a psychologist or a theologian. I haven't been to Bible college or any place that might give me some kind of credentials that separate me out as especially holy in knowledge. Who I am is a survivor. I'm a sister in Christ who believed all the Christian teachings on marriage and lived them out. I ended up trapped in an abusive marriage for almost 34 years, not even realizing it was abuse. That last phrase, not even realizing it was abuse, could be the key to understanding your own situation if your marriage has lots of conflict. Through that journey, I've accumulated some interesting and some disturbing knowledge about how wolves in sheep's clothing can stay hidden in marriage and even thrive within the Christian community and churches. This clip is taken from my main video titled, What Every Wife Needs to Know About Reversed Polarity in Marriage. You can find the link for that in the description box and at the end of the video. Do you remember when your husband used to chase you? When he'd go out of his way to make you feel special and important? In the beginning of your marriage, you probably felt a connection, like you mattered and that he saw you for who you really were. But now you feel distant and separated, invisible, not really like a priority anymore. I know how disappointing it is. You keep trying to rediscover that feeling that you had in the beginning, but instead it just keeps getting further away. It's the worst kind of rejection because when people see you, the two of you look like you're a couple, but behind closed doors, your marriage feels more like it's two single people who share the same address. Not really a friendship, let alone a one-flesh relationship. It's more like two people just going through the motions that they think they're supposed to when they're married. It's depressing when you keep putting your heart on the line and doing everything you can think of to make it better, but nothing ever really changes. For me, it was like trying to bake a cake and it never turning out. Every time I found a new recipe, I was so hopeful that this was going to be the one that was going to work. I was careful to try and pick all the best ingredients and check and recheck the measurements of every ingredient as I was adding it. I was so sure this was going to be the one that finally worked. But no matter how hard I tried and how careful I was, it never happened. The outcome was always the same as the last 10 recipes I'd tried. Oh my stars, how can that happen? How can a wife try so hard to be the very best that she can be? How can she read every bit of information she can get her hands on? And things don't only not change, they get worse. I have the answer. That's exactly what happens when polarities get reversed in your marriage. Let me tell you how that happens. I understood the basics of men and women, the obvious, that we both have estrogen and testosterone, even though I didn't really know what that meant. So I understood the what, but I didn't understand the how or the why of how those hormones influence the energy in a male body versus a female one. So if we don't understand the energy of our own bodies, there's no way to know that the energies from each hormone can get reversed. Older Christian women haven't taught younger women the truth about their own femininity or the depth of its power. Titus 2. That means we don't understand our own bodies, and that's wrong because our bodies are our temples. Romans 12, verse 1. How can we effectively steward what we don't understand? We can't. I don't know about you, but I grew up hearing things like, men and women both have testosterone, and it's not just men that have testosterone. The message that I ended up internalizing was that the hormones themselves didn't really matter. What mattered more was the push for equality, really more like equalization, each hormone being neutralized to behave like the other. Instead of learning the interdependence of masculine and feminine biology, women were being taught to act like men, but it was disguised under a mask called equality. You know what? There's a detrimental shift that happens inside a woman when she accepts that kind of mindset. It's super subtle, which is what makes it so dangerous to her heart. There's a couple of consequences from that shift. The first one is that there's a distortion of attraction. God created a natural dynamic that's meant to exist between men and women. But what happens is that the genuine attraction that's rooted in that interplay between masculinity and femininity, the focus shifts from attraction to attention. Specifically with a woman, her attention becomes fixated on the testosterone in a man's body, making that the central focus. This shift degrades the natural balance, and what happens is what God meant to be an interdependent relationship between the masculine and feminine has now been turned into competition. The second thing that happens with the shift, and to me it's the saddest part, the second thing that happens is that in this mindset, a woman is trained to completely ignore the star hormone that God gave her. It leaves estrogen, which is our main driver, sitting on the sidelines like some undiscovered wallflower. This obsession to be equal with testosterone, it doesn't just diminish how important estrogen is to a female's body, it has completely invalidated the power of femininity altogether simply by neglecting it. I, for one, am eternally grateful for the power that I discovered in my femininity as I started to heal. It was this knowledge that freed me from an abusive marriage. There's a quote by Marilyn Monroe where she says, "Women who seek to be equal with men lack ambition." I love this quote. She's challenging the idea of using men's testosterone as the benchmark for any kind of success. And instead, she's encouraging us to advocate for the potential and all the possibilities within our own personal brand of femininity. By trying so hard to equalize everything about a woman to a man, we end up ignoring the fact that what makes a woman's energy so unique is that she's powered by estrogen. It's like estrogen gets brushed aside like it doesn't really matter or that it's optional. That's the one that really grinds my gears. Emotions and feelings aren't optional for us. And here's the thing. When a woman ends up thinking along these lines, when equality and counting and measuring everything become her central focus, without even realizing it, she's being pulled away from embracing the beautiful God-given design of femininity, and instead she's pushing herself to go after something she was never meant to chase. The truth that would have been super helpful for me in my marriage, the truth that older Christian women should have shared with me, the truth that no one talks about, is the fact that males and females, yes, they both have estrogen and testosterone, but in completely opposite ratios to each other, not equal amounts. A woman's testosterone is not equal to a man's, and a man's estrogen is not equal to a woman's. When it comes to masculinity and femininity, there is zero equality. God intentionally made them equally reversed. Men have got testosterone and estrogen at a ratio of about 90 to 10. But it's the reverse for women. We've got about 90% estrogen and only 10% testosterone. And it's not just that the ratios are opposite. Our estrogen isn't simple like the 10% that the men have. Female estrogen is complex because it's made up of 3 different hormones: estriol, estrone, and estradiol. And we've got a 4th one called progesterone. And we don't just have all these juicy hormones in abundance. Each one of them take turns decreasing and increasing in our bodies through distinct cycles every 4 weeks. Talk about a huge limiting belief. Here's one. To believe that the only reason God gave a woman estrogen was to reproduce. Estrogen doesn't just play an important role in a woman's reproductive system. It's a huge, huge contributing factor to our entire physiological process as women. Men with only about 10% of estrogen in their bodies, they don't feel the power of this multidimensional, complex experience because women embody 90% more of this hormonal influence. It makes complete sense that we feel all the impacts and intricacies from estrogen 90% more than they do. When we don't understand what these hormones are made up of, what they really mean to each one of us, how they function, and why we have them, that's how the polarities get reversed. It's a lack of knowledge. Hosea 4, verse 6. If that happens, it's going to cause a lot of havoc in marriage, and we can end up doing a lot of damage to each other. And the worst part is that we end up not being able to honor God in the specific way He designed us to.